Hello once again. Welcome back to the shop. It's Mike, of course, because it's my shop. In front of you are most of the parts, or at least some of the parts, for a resin casting of the Book of the Dead and the key for the Book of the Dead from 1999's The Mummy with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. It is a big chunk of resin. And I know this is not a real parts video necessarily, but this is what is called a garage kit. And garage kits are extremely short run, usually resin casting models of props or of whatever. This one is actually one of only 5 made so far from a mold that was made from the original Stunt Prop from the film. Now, while it is not real parts, as I said, I can, however, verify the lineage of the molds, which is close enough for me, since this thing actually has no real parts involved in it. It was completely sculpted from scratch, and the idea was completely concepted by the art department for The Mummy. So, because I can track the lineage and verify the lineage of these, I'm going to go ahead and call it real parts, because it's as close as can be to the actual prop. Now this is a casting from the stunt prop of the key when it was open, obviously. And it fits, once I'll get all the flash off of it, it'll fit quite nicely in there. And all of this will go together quite well. And as is standard with all resin kits, it has some problems. It's got some air bubbles and stuff that need to be filled, and that's just the way things go with these. But all in all, it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful kit. And RPF user Adomata, I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but Adomata is more fun to say, so I'm just going to go with Adomata from here on out. If that's not how you pronounce your name, I apologize. He's the one that got a hold of the molds and cast these out, and myself and 4 other people bought them so far. Hopefully more buy them from him. This whole, the front cover and the back cover are supposed to be made out of obsidian. So this will all be very, very shiny black. These will all be shiny black. This is gold. This, of course, is gold, as is this. And then all the trim pieces on the side, those are gold as well. So I'm going to be using some metallic techniques that I've never done before, and I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make that work. And hopefully at the end, I have a pretty accurate representation of the Book of the Dead from The Mummy, because that movie's cool, and the props from it are amazing, particularly this one. So I've gone ahead and I've primed this thing with just regular old Rust-Oleum gray primer. And then I let it dry up a little bit, and then went over it with 1000 grit sandpaper, which gives it a bit of a polish, which is going to help when I apply the semi-gloss black, which is going to be the base coat for what will eventually be obsidian, or pseudo-obsidian, fake obsidian, because this thing's supposedly made of obsidian, but it's resin, so it doesn't matter. Now this has 2 coats of just regular old semi-gloss black from Rust-Oleum on it, and I've let those cure up. And you can see all of this over here is quite weathered, and I've done that with just some Tamiya Weathering Master Powder, number A, because that's a number. The sand, light sand, mud. I started with mud, and then I've worked up to light sand. Now, I didn't touch this part because I want to show you what kind of effect you can get rather quickly to give it that weathered, covered in dirt, sort of gross look of that it looks on screen, this still shot, which is what I'm trying to mimic. Okay, so with your Tamiya Weathering Master number A, I'm just going to call it a number from here on out, going with mud, which is the darker one, get plenty of it in a brush, and then quite liberally apply it. You're going to lose a lot of it out of the brush into the crevices, which is going to mimic dirt and mud, and, well, not mud, it's in the desert, but dirt and filth and grime, because it's been in the little crypt, its little box that it lived in the film, for many, many years. Long time, a couple decades at least. So it will apparently collected dust, and based on how the prop looks in the screenshot, this one, it's quite dirty at this stage in its existence. So once, kind of try and make it as even as possible. It doesn't have to be, of course, perfectly even. It's weathering, it's never perfectly even. But once it's well distributed, and use a brush you don't really care so much about, because this thing started out nice and pretty and clean, and straight. Now it's fraying and it's coming apart, and that's just sort of what this does to these brushes. Again, these are cheap brushes I buy in bulk, so I don't really care. And then we're going to move on to light sand. Plenty in your brush. And then this one I'm going over much lighter passes to just catch the high detail. And it's also going to leave something that mimics sand behind, because this is in the desert. And suspension of disbelief, it doesn't have to be perfect. Yes, it's been in a box this whole time. It's not going to be exposed to the sand, but maybe some sand creeped in. Who knows? Maybe it was dirty when they put it in the box. Maybe nobody cleans stuff in Hymenoptera. Maybe their maintenance department was out that day that they performed the Hom die and put old Imhotep in his box with some scarabs. All right, and now I have not done the rest of this with the sand, this guy. So I'm just going to do all of it. And this is, again, this is going to be very, very light, because this is going to catch quite a bit of detail. You see how it's much lighter than the rest of it. And again, very, very light passes with this. See, I already lost a hair for the brush. See, it's filled in those crevices with dirt and grossness quite well. So I am experimenting with some stuff while I make these videos, and like I've said before, I hope that at least some of it is something that somebody can take away from here and have at least a better idea of how to do something. Maybe they learn something from me, or realize that I'm doing it so terribly wrong that they've discovered a new way of performing something correctly. I don't know. Could be torture. Who knows? It's a Firefly reference. All right. Now, because this entire model is made out of resin, it's quite heavy, and these 4 sidewall panels, they're not the strongest thing in the world as far as support goes, because not only does it have to hold the weight of this front plate, but it also has to hold the weight of all of the locks and everything else on the side. So I've used some scrap PVC pipe to give it a little bit more support. So all of the weight will actually be on those pieces of PVC pipe, and I won't have to worry about anything on the side. Now this thing's really bright and shiny right now, and in case you were wondering, these locks, these birds, they're vultures, which is pretty neat. I didn't notice that until I got this model, that they were actually vultures, but you can see the feathers on the legs. And they're quite shiny, as is all of the gold parts right now. I will go through and stain all that and make it not shiny, so that it's a little bit more usable and a little bit more screen accurate, which is what I want. I want it to look as close to the model on screen as I can. The Book of the Dead from The Mummy is actually based on a real thing. It's based on the Book of the Dead, which was a real thing, but in papyrus form. And it really wasn't this. It was filled with spells, or what were called spells, but it was more a guidebook on decorum in the afterlife, how to act once you die, when you meet the gods, and then how to get through the different tests in the afterlife to go to paradise, because you had to go through a testing phase, apparently. And one of those tests is something that has actually been depicted several times in pop culture, most recently in American Gods, the TV show American Gods, and in the book, is having your heart weighed against a feather by Osiris. That's spell 125. That's the most commonly known one. And if your heart was lighter than the feather, you went on to paradise. If your heart was heavier than the feather, apparently that option meant that your heart got thrown onto the floor and got eaten by a demon, and then you no longer existed. So pretty harsh right there. But it was a guidebook, and they were quite popular with nobles and with the wealthy and the pharaohs, because it meant that they had a guidebook on how to act in the afterlife. And ultimately, they became more popular with the common people, and then they just became a fairly common thing. And there are actually a few examples of them still in existence, but they didn't look like this. They weren't made of gold and obsidian. They were made out of papyrus, most likely. Here it is, all done, all weathered up and dirtied and made to look all dark and gross. The Book of the Dead from 1999's The Mummy. I'm happy with where it's at. I'm not going to mess with it anymore, because I'll just overdo it, and I don't want to overdo it. But I'm quite happy with where it's at, so I'm going to leave it alone. I know that I mentioned the key earlier on in the video and I didn't do anything with it. It has a different look than the book does, so it's going to be some different techniques, and I'm going to do a different video on the build of this. But it's a neat little kit unto itself, and I kind of want to devote a whole video to it because it is an enormous amount of little details all the way around it, and it's got some cleanup that needs done, but it doesn't really matter. I'd like to also take this opportunity to say hello to the Lake Orion Thespians Troupe 2898 up in Lake Orion, Michigan. My good buddy Drew runs the show up there, and he is having his prop kids watch these videos to maybe take some lessons away from it. And by prop kids, I mean they're real kids. They just make props. If you would please, whoever's watching, not just the folks up in Lake Orion, hit the like and subscribe, and consider my Patreon to help support my channel so that I can keep making more of this stuff and keep making more of these videos.